We'll take a closer look at the political landscape in Illinois in this election year and bringing the body back to the wickedest city in the cities. At the turn of the last century, Davenport, because of the red light district known as Bucktown, was called the wickedest city in America. Well, a Burlesque Festival is embracing that this month, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, political theater. As the Illinois legislature pushes its way towards the last 6 weeks of the 2026 session, we take a closer look at the politics in the state as candidates start to pivot now toward the November elections. Western Illinois University political scientist Dr. Keith Boeckelman is a student of Illinois government, and I talked with him from his offices in Macomb. You know, the big buzzword for 2026 has been affordability. Democrats really started this last fall. Republicans are using it as well. Is that the huge campaign theme that you're expecting in 2026?
Well, I do think that Governor Pritzker is clearly going to try to run, at least in part, on this. He's adopted a lot of the National Democratic Party ideas around affordability, particularly related to housing, into his own initiatives for the spring legislative session. And I think this will be something that he will emphasize in his campaign as well. And so a lot of the affordability ideas focus on the notion that many traditional Democratic policies, such as environmental review and so forth, make it hard to build housing. And so Governor Pritzker has this build initiative where he's going to try to limit some of these regulations, also provide funding for first-generation home buyers, trying to reduce some of the parking regulations that limit the ability to build housing, some other things. So he's adopting a lot of these national Democratic policies and trying to implement them in Illinois, and I'm sure he will run on these as well.
Yeah, definitely national policies as well, because I mean the whole issue of affordability now comes into question with, you know, higher prices for virtually everything, consumer goods, either because of the war in Iran or the higher tariffs. I mean, it's really hitting, and gas prices as well, as you well know, is really hitting American pocketbooks. The question is whether the hurt that we're seeing now will last into November.
Yeah, well, so I think part of this depends on how the war in Iran plays out, but I think by most accounts, gas prices are still likely to be higher into November, and they're going to probably last for quite a while. I think it's interesting to see how state-level politicians are kind of processing this. So Tony McCombie, the Illinois House Minority Leader, is emphasizing some of the Republican ideas on affordability, like property tax cuts, no tax on tips, which is a national level policy of President Trump, while the House Speaker in Illinois, Chris Welch, is trying to say that some of the things the Democrats are doing, like providing for mass transit in Chicago, is affordability. So to some degree, you can also see this being kind of dovetailed with the party's existing agendas and using affordability as a buzzword to try to justify what they're already doing or what they're already advocating.
Well, there's always that philosophy that you go back to James Carville during the Clinton race for the presidency, where it's the economy stupid. I mean, that holds as true today, I guess, as it did, wow, I can't believe it's, some 30 years ago.
It is hard to believe that. But yeah, I think both at the state and the national level, the economy is almost always the number one issue for voters. And so, you know, if the economy is not looking good, I think that creates problems, at least for President Trump and the Republicans. Now, of course, it plays out a little bit differently at the state level where you had the Democrats in charge. But you can also see them making efforts to try to say that the economic problems are President Trump's fault.
Well, and let's be honest, I mean, the rural voter, the farm vote, is so strongly conservative and so strongly Republican, and in many ways very much backs President Trump. But yet they're getting hit the hardest by the tariffs as well as the war and the higher prices for fertilizer and gas. Um, is that a voting bloc, rural Illinois, that could swing more Democratic?
I think it's possible, but I kind of doubt it, honestly. I mean, first off, I think that the number of actual farmers, even in rural Illinois, is still outweighed by people living in towns and smaller cities and so forth. But I also think that while some farm groups are criticizing the tariffs and raising concerns about the high price of fertilizer and so forth, I do think that rural voters are really very distrustful of the Democrats. And so I don't see this changing over one election cycle, maybe in the longer term, perhaps, but I don't really see that happening in 2026 elections.
The legislature's session is, of course, winding down in a couple of weeks, and also the budget is also always almost the last is the last major issue, but sometimes the last issue period of the legislative session. The governor proposing a $56 billion budget. The Illinois Policy, it's a conservative group, says the state can expect $21 billion deficit over the next 5 years. It seems like Illinois is always facing some kind of a budget crisis right now.
Well, and I think part of this stems from the unfunded pension liabilities that Illinois has. I mean, Illinois has the least well-funded pension system of any state in the country. We're spending a lot of money to pay off previous pension debts and previous underfunding of pensions. And so essentially, while the governor in his State of the State address is touting a balanced budget, there are structural factors that make it difficult to balance the budget over this longer time frame, particularly the pension situation. And we don't, you mentioned the economy earlier. We don't know what's going to happen with the economy, but if the economy does go into recession, that obviously harms tax revenues. The Illinois tax structure is very heavily dependent on income taxes, particularly and sales taxes on goods. So particularly the income tax portion can be very sensitive to going into recession, and that compounds the problem in future years. So again, the governor's touting a balanced budget this year, but there are a lot of headwinds and challenges we could potentially be facing in the out years.
Well, and the governor's also creating kind of a boogeyman in a way with President Trump and Republican lawmakers by saying that the White House and the Trump administration is targeting blue states such as Illinois and not funding certain things only because they are Illinois. Does that hold true politically, that you make Trump your scapegoat for any budget problems there are in Illinois?
Well, I don't know if, I think there's some truth to what the governor's saying. I mean, recently, for example, the president cut off some food programs to Illinois because he didn't like the state's policies on DEI and immigration. And so I think that there's some truth to what the governor says. Now, will it work politically? I'm not sure if the ability to shift the blame really there. I think if people start feeling these cuts, they're not always sure who's responsible for them and who to assign the blame to. But I do think it's the governor's political interest to try to make the case that this is Trump's fault, not his fault.
And the budget and the way the economy is going is going to be an issue, of course, in the gubernatorial race. But Pritzker, it's a rematch right now
Right.
with Darren Bailey. So what does Bailey really have to do to improve his standing compared to the last election?
Well, I think to win elections in Illinois, you need to win two of the three regions, basically. So being Chicago, downstate, and the suburbs. And we know that the downstate is going to go for Darren Bailey. We know Chicago is going to go for Pritzker. So Bailey needs to make some inroads into the suburbs. And I think the way he does that is focusing on more on economic issues like property taxes, things like that. So if he can pin some of the Illinois' economic struggles on the governor, that's really his path to victory. Now, Bailey has a brand as a strong social conservative, and focused on issues like abortion and LGBTQ rights and things like that. And so he's going to have to, and that does not run as well in the suburbs. And so he's going to have to distance himself from his own brand a little bit. And I think he's making efforts to do that. I looked on his website and it does emphasize these issues like property taxes more than social issues. But, since he has run before, he does have this brand. And that's going to be really his challenge, to distance himself from that, to convince enough people in the suburbs that he's a more moderate kind of Republican.
And in some ways, he gave a little bit of a mea culpa about the last run, and as you said, his brand. But you think that he may soften his campaign this time around, but does that really mean that he softened his positions?
Yeah, I don't think he's softening his positions, but he can try to soften his brand. I mean, I think his brand is as a strong social conservative. If you look him up on Wikipedia, for example, it says something like Darren Bailey is an extreme right-wing Republican or something like that, which is not to say that Wikipedia is unbiased, but it is, I think, an indication of how Darren Bailey is viewed. And so if he has any chance, I think he needs to rebrand himself again a little bit. Now, I will say that sometimes running for the third term can be tricky for a sitting governor, and that's where J.B. Pritzker is right now. Jim Thompson, when he ran for his third term, had a very narrow squeaker of election where he, I think, won by 7,000 or 8,000 votes. And so, there could be a little bit of that idea that Pritzker's been in long enough, but I think it's going to be very challenging in what's shaping up to be a Democratic year for Bailey to beat Pritzker.
The other big race, of course, is for the U.S. Senate, with Dick Durbin retiring, and Juliana Stratton, the lieutenant governor, with the backing of Pritzker. Pritzker almost a kingmaker in this case. Does Don Tracy really have much of a chance in this particular race? Because, as you say, midterm elections often swing against the administration, so it could be a Democratic wave.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things working against Don Tracy. I mean, he's not, in my part of the state, he's somewhat well known, but he's not necessarily that well known statewide, even though he was the Republican Party chair. Juliana Stratton, while she's lieutenant governor, which is certainly not the same name recognition as the governor, she has been on the statewide ticket twice now, so she has a little bit of more name recognition from that. And again, I think she has the fact that she's a Democrat and to her advantage in this particular election. In the primary, both she and Don Tracy each got about 40% of the vote. But since so many more Democrats voted in the Democratic primary, she got about over twice as many actual votes as he did. And so I think that's kind of an indicator that there's more energy on the Democratic side going into this election than on the Republican side. So he, like Darren Bailey, I think has an uphill battle. I don't think he necessarily he's in a better position to brand himself than Darren Bailey is, because he hasn't run for statewide office before. But I think, again, another thing working against him a little bit is some of the big Republican donors have kind of fled the scene. Ken Griffin, who put a lot of money into Republican politicians, moved to Florida. Richard Uihlein, another big donor, seems to be sitting on the sidelines a little bit more for this one. So he's going to have to be able to raise substantial money, whereas Stratton can sort of depend on Pritzker's bankrolling her campaign.
One interesting Republican election from the primary was Noreen Hammond losing quite decisively to Josh Higgins. Higgins getting 58% of the vote, Noreen Hammond 33%. She's the deputy Republican leader. I mean, she was the establishment. She survived when Rauner tried to get rid of her a few primaries ago. What do you read into the fact that she lost so badly to a conservative, perhaps more conservative Republican?
Well, I do think there was an effort to turn out the more MAGA Republicans, which she is not really seen as in this primary. There were efforts in Republican primaries across the state to do that, frankly. This was the most successful one, upsetting her. But I think part of the issue she faced is that her district used to include Macomb, which of course includes my university, Western Illinois, and it was easier to justify some of her votes, like for the tax increase during the Rauner era, as helping Western. But now that's not part of her district anymore, and so she's got a very rural district, and I think the MAGA presence in the district was not really counterbalanced by some of the elements in her former district. And so I think the redistricting probably hurt her in this case.
Well, I thank you for your time. I appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you. It's good talking to you.
Our thanks to Western Illinois University political science professor Dr. Keith Boeckelman. Just ahead, bringing a world of burlesque to 3 stages later this month. But first, some of the events scheduled throughout the cities right now, thanks to Visit Quad Cities.
Check out the things to do this week in the Quad Cities. Start your week off with an afternoon of fun on Celebration River Cruise's narrated lunch cruise. Next, enjoy a musical celebration of female country music stars. Check out Honky Tonk Angels this week. Then enjoy a special program performed by Ballet Quad Cities at the Faggy Art Museum. Next, experience a celebration during the Wickedest City Burlesque and Variety Festival, happening throughout the Quad Cities. Finally, enjoy Ragged Records and music while they celebrate Record Store Day. It'll be filled with fun gifts and limited items. For more events like these, check out our events calendar at visitquadcities.com.
Davenport had quite a reputation in the early 1900s. The Bishop of Davenport, Henry Cosgrove, who was once shot at in his bed by burglars and who strongly believed in the evils of liquor, called Davenport the wickedest city of its size in America. Well, now, 123 years later, that wickedness is being embraced. The Wickedest City Burlesque and Variety Fest is hitting the stages of the Adler, the Capitol Theater, and the Circuit 21 Speakeasy for a 3-day run starting Thursday, April 16th. We talked with one of the organizers, Manhattan, about what we can expect. Wickedest City Burlesque and Variety Festival. Where did you come up with this idea? And let's be honest, 3 different venues. This is a biggie.
I came up with the idea because I've been to a couple of different festivals, and I'm like, they need it around here, especially the Quad Cities. It's just a thriving area of burlesque. And but I've been to a lot of burlesque festivals, and there's not like a lot of variety, like drag, circus, like there's just so much that you can do. So I'm like, well, I really want to make it a variety fest and, have them feel involved. And then like the 3 nights is just because I'm an overachiever.
Well, okay, let's talk about the first night. It's at the Adler Theater. This is competition that's going on. Thursday, April 16th is when this is all kicking off.
Yes.
What type of reaction did you get from the burlesque community? Because they're coming from all over.
They are. I got like a huge amount of people wanting to come. I have people coming from Arizona, North Carolina, Seattle, locally here in the Quad Cities, Des Moines. Just so many people applied for this competition, and I didn't think the competition would do as well as it did, but yeah. A bunch of people are like, I want to compete. I'm like, cool.
That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, I should back up a bit because burlesque is described as boundary-pushing entertainment. Some people, let's be honest, it's adult entertainment.
Yes.
But how bawdy does it get? I mean, explain to me what people would be able to see.
You can see anything from somebody doing like a classic burlesque, so just like a simple, just removal, teasing, stuff like that. Or you can see people doing amazing tricks on like a chair or dress up as a cow or giant Furby. So many different kinds of things. So it's kind of like, if you can imagine it, somebody's probably done a burlesque routine to it. So.
Well, what got you involved in it? What made you go, oh, this is so unique, I got to be a part of it?
A lot of convincing from friends. It was. I do photography, so I was like photographing a couple of the performers, and then they were like, oh, you should try this, and I'm like, I'm good, I don't need to do that. And then going to the shows, and then I took like the classes and stuff, and I was just like, I have to do this. I can do weird stuff, I can perform these cool things, and yeah.
What are you thinking when you're on stage?
It's just sometimes it's, especially when I'm like giant Furby, I'm like, I'm adorable. I'm a giant Furby. Or it's like you're just kind of hyping into yourself. It's like
Yeah.
another character too, so.
But you must bounce off a lot by the audience.
Oh yeah, I feed off of the audience reaction so much, especially like doing tricks and stuff, and then they scream or they yell, and like you just look and you're
Yeah.
like, yes, I'm doing it.
Have you always been, I would hate to say this, kind of a ham? I mean, does that
Nope,
really?
nope,
So
nope, definitely.
This is like a total different persona for you then.
Yes, yes.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people that's like, I'll just chill out over here. You guys have fun.
Until the stage lights hit. Let's talk about day 2. The second night is the Fandom Showcase. That's going to be at the Speakeasy, a much smaller venue there right next to Circa 21.
Yeah.
What's happening at that event?
So it's Fandom Showcase, which is kind of like all the fandoms you can think of, like from science fiction to fantasy to like comic book to anime, like any kind of super nerd or fantasy kind of like act is going to be there. So it's amazing. We have features of Lychee Minx, who is here in the Quad Cities, and then Betsy Bo Peep, who is from Muscatine, and she actually runs her Nerds in Heat with Betsy Bo Peep. Lychee Minx is with the Illuminatis, which is locally here too, and then Maki Roll is up in DC, who does the International Burlesque Festival and performs everywhere. And then I have headliners Queen Kwan and Charlie Quinn Starling. So
Now, some people might be going, what is this woman talking
I know.
about?
It's a lot.
And, well, it is a lot, but I mean, this is something that, it's a form of entertainment. As you said, burlesque has been popping up more in the Quad Cities. It's becoming an event that more people are attending. If you haven't been to burlesque, what are you telling people about this?
I like with
Don't be afraid, I would think is one.
Oh yeah, burlesque. I mean, it's definitely. So some people have kind of like an attitude towards it, like they're like, oh, like I'm good, and I'm like, actually no, it's very like enriching. It's very like I want to say cultured for a lot of. Some of it's fun, like it's just weird,
Just off the map.
off the yeah. But it's also like cultured and like it shows different like attributes of people, strengths of people, or just some people being like, hey, I'm really good looking and I can make you feel all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I think that's fantastic. So
Then the third night, the last night, is the Grand Showcase. That's going to be at the Capitol
Yes.
Theater.
Yep.
We were talking earlier, that's such a cool venue to use. Tell me about the Grand Showcase.
The Grand Showcase is like the like also wide array, but it's more towards like not burlesque and not like there's no competition. But the competition winner will be performing that night. So that's like one of the things that they win. But we have our headliners, Queen Kwan from New Orleans, performing that night with Charlie Quinn Starling, who is originally from the UK but lives in Vegas. And then we have Drop Dead Red, who is, Quad Cities, own amazing performer. And then Kitty Bardot, who's 2 features. And then it's like, just big, extravagant, like, good routines that just like they've worked really, really hard on these routines. So yeah.
Tickets are available right now. We have the location, your website on the screen. You describe them as fearless performances.
Yes.
I like the smile because it takes something to get up on that stage.
Oh, yeah.
And to be something completely, I mean, as you were saying for yourself, completely different, totally out of your wheelhouse.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's you have to just kind of go out there. There's like something different. So I've done theater, in the past. Which,
Sure.
I've done that, but it's always been like a small character, and it's like you have to own everything to be on that stage, to be up there, whether it's like a small bar stage or if it's like a big theater stage like that. Like it's fearless. Like you're doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like enchanting people and working with people, and it's just, it's a lot.
So what's your pitch now? Because this is the last few moments that we have for those people that are just kind of going, I'm not sure this is for me.
It's for everybody. I mean, there's so many different things that you will get from it, that you'll learn from it, that you'll like from it, that you can just be like, a moment that you'll think about for like the next 6 months that you're like, that was really cool. And it's like, you're going to look at your friend that you went with and you're going to be like, hey, remember that just random thing. And they're going to be like, yeah, I definitely remember that. I wonder what's the next thing.
Yeah.
So.
Wickedest City Burlesque and Variety Fest. This is just the first one.
Yes. Yep. Just the first one.
Hopefully back year after year.
Trying.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Our thanks to Manhattan, one of the organizers of the upcoming Wickedest City Burlesque and Variety Fest. Once again, it starts Thursday, April 16th. You can get more information at wickedestcityburlesqueandvarietyfest.com. The Midwest Writing Conference, also once called Bucktown area its home. It has since moved to the Rock Island Library, but it still provides budding writers a place to grow. It is led by Ryan Collins. Now, as we mark the nation's 250th birthday, we're asking people how they got to where they are and how they are impacting our community. So we asked Ryan, what's his civic spark?
Well, I think writing is important to any society, culture. It's how we capture our history, it's how we express ourselves, it's how we share ideas. It's a cornerstone of education, and that's one of the primary ways we can lift ourselves up and lift each other up. And so any work that we can do along those lines, I feel like is worthwhile.
Our thanks to Ryan Collins, director of the Midwest Writing Center, telling us of his civic spark. On the air, on the radio, on the web, on your mobile device, and streaming on your computer. Thanks for taking some time to join us as we talk about the issues on the cities.